been working on the economics of early care and education for about 30 years now. It's gotten a lot more attention since the President brought it up in the State of the Union address. And I want to highlight a couple of things about that. I think there's been a lot of, it's amazing to me how strong the reaction to something that is in many ways so small is. This is a proposal that, despite the fact that it includes home visiting and infant and toddler programs as well as programs for preschoolers, the financial cost of this in the budget is probably rounding error. It's that small. And yet it's been attacked numerous times on the editorial pages of the Wall Street Journal, on television, many other places. We have a statistical summary. It's called a meta-analysis of all the research on the effects of preschool programs since 1960. And the results are very clear. Substantial effects of all these programs. And while they are smaller later on than they are when children immediately exit a program, because after all, we gave them a couple of years of preschool, we didn't solve poverty and all of the other problems that the kids have to deal with. So it's not surprising they're smaller later on, but this story that somehow they disappear simply isn't true. It just, if you look at all of the evidence, it's just not true. And my job as an economist has been to try to figure out, so what are the consequences of all of these outcomes for kids? The fact that they get to school more ready, that they have higher achievement, that they're less likely to fail and be held back, they're less likely to need special education, they're more likely to graduate from high school, they're less likely to get involved in crime and delinquency, they're more productive as adults, for all of those reasons I just talked about. And that's reflected to some extent in their earnings, depending on whether they're in the paid economy or not. But it's also in the quality of the next generation that they produce because of the time they spend that's not in the economy and not counted. So it turns out one of the surprising things from doing this is that the returns are huge. So in theory, people knew there was all this stuff we weren't counting. But in practice, no one had actually added it up. And when economists started doing this, we discovered that the benefits of these early childhood programs were on the order of 10 times up to 20 times their cost. So these are much higher rates of return than you can get in the stock market investing in the private sector in good times. So these are these are largely public sector investments we're talking about in early care and education. Well, so lots of studies, and they're not any longer based on projections of what might happen. I started working on the peri-preschool study at the age 19 follow-up in 1980. They're now working on the age 50 follow-up. I was part of the age 40 follow-up. If you haven't embarked on a life of crime by 40, you're really not going to turn to the dark side.
Except for white collar.
Right. And white collar crime starts early too. So if you're 40 and you haven't embarked on white collar crime, you've been clean all those years, I'll trust you with my portfolio. So we actually have a lot of solid data on this, and yet if we look at, so what's been the policy response? Well, there have been policy responses. We've doubled public pre-K over the last decade, but that means we went from enrolling 14% of 4-year-olds to 28% of 4-year-olds. And if we ask nationally, who's enrolled in any kind of program at all? About half the kids in poverty. A little more than half the kids who are middle income and not in poverty. And 3/4 or more of the kids in the highest income category. So this opportunity is vastly unequal. And then if you say, okay, what percentage of those kids who go to centers are in high-quality centers that could produce the kinds of benefits that I've been talking about? The answer is only about a third. So we put those numbers together. Who goes to preschool in the first place? Who gets a high-quality program if they go to preschool? And despite Head Start and public school preschool and all the things we do, only about 15% of kids in poverty are in a high-quality program. Maybe 20% of middle-income kids, 1 out of 5. And really only about 30% of high-income kids. The wonderful study of quality in California that shows in California kids in families above 500% of the poverty line actually get the worst quality care at 3 and 4. Because they don't have access to public programs, and that's virtually the only place in California you're finding high-quality programs. So, if I had the slide, I'd show you a map, but you can go to nieei.org and look at the state preschool yearbook for last year, and you can see a map of the United States that shows the access to public pre-K by state. And when the president says that access to high-quality care varies by zip code, you can see it colorized. It absolutely does. And not just by zip code within states, but across states. So in Oklahoma, school starts at 4. West Virginia, beginning this next fall, school will start at 4. In Texas, half the kids get programs. There's 10 other states that don't offer any public preschool at all, and lots of other states in between. So accident of birth, where you're born, has a lot to do today with whether you get a quality preschool education. And one of the remarkable things about it, to me, is that at the state level and the local level, it is not a partisan issue. It is not a conservative, liberal issue. If you look at, so who are the leading states? Well, Oklahoma, West Virginia, Florida, Georgia. Bobby Jindal in Louisiana 2 years ago proposed universal pre-K for his state. Why all the negative reaction to the president's proposal? Right? The atmosphere in Washington, D.C. is very different on these issues of caring than it is at the state level. And somehow I think we need to push up from the state level to the national level these bipartisan politics that are supportive of, I won't call them progressive policies because that might turn people off, but caring policies. Caring is not exclusive to one political party or one side of the aisle. Outside of Washington, D.C.,